The dining room fell into silence, not because of the painstakingly prepared prime rib or the polished silver that made the evening feel more like a museum exhibit than a meal. No, it was what my father had just hurled across the table that froze us all. "You're the biggest disappointment this family's ever seen," he slurred, eyes glassy. "You never should have been born." The words landed like a blow. Silence spread like smoke. My cousin stopped mid-bite. My uncle's knife slipped from his fingers and clanged against the plate. Even my sister, the golden one, looked away, suddenly fascinated by her wine glass. I sat at the far corner of the massive oak table, exactly where they always put me, out of sight, out of mind. I blinked hard, forcing my expression to stay neutral. No tears, not tonight. Only one sound broke the silence, the rhythmic tapping of my grandfather's cane. Tap, tap, tap. Then, crack. At 86, Grandpa still had the command of a general. He shoved himself upright, his cane slamming against the marble floor like a gavel. "Enough," he thundered, his voice echoing through the vaulted room. The dog yelped beneath the table. My father opened his mouth, but Grandpa silenced him with a single, sharp gesture. "You think she's the mistake?" he growled, sweeping the room with a hard stare. "She's the failure?" He jabbed his cane toward me. "She's the only one here who still carries the heart this family was built on." The room tensed. Then, Grandpa turned to me, his voice softening. "Avery, tell them what you told me last Thursday." My chest tightened, my hands trembled beneath the table, but he nodded, and I found my voice. "3 months ago," I said, my voice shaking but steadying, "I saved the family business from foreclosure." A collective gasp moved through the room. "I did it quietly, bought the debt under another name. I wasn't looking for credit," I swallowed. "I did it because Grandpa's legacy mattered, even when none of you did." The silence that followed felt different, thicker, weighted. My father scoffed, voice rising with disbelief. "That's not possible, she doesn't even." "Because I taught her," Grandpa cut in, firm, "every Saturday morning. While the rest of you ignored her, I was teaching her how to lead." The shift was palpable. My cousin shoved his plate away. My sister clutched the edge of the table. My stepmother sat frozen, lips parted in stunned silence. I looked down at my untouched plate, and for once, their silence didn't crush me. It felt like power. But Grandpa wasn't finished. He reached into his old navy blazer, the one everyone laughed at behind his back, and pulled out a creased envelope. With careful hands, he slid it across the table to my father. My father snatched it, eyes narrowing. "What is this?" "Open it," Grandpa said, calm now, but still thunderous. The air turned electric as my father unfolded the letter inside. "I wrote that 27 years ago," Grandpa said, loud enough for all to hear. "When your mother found out she was pregnant again." The whispers started, everyone said it was a mistake. He scanned the faces around him. But it wasn't. I couldn't breathe. He turned to me, eyes burning with something fierce and tender. "Avery wasn't an accident. She was the child I prayed for." Another gasp rippled through the room. "Doctors said I wouldn't live to see another year," Grandpa continued. "I asked for a reason to keep fighting, a legacy to believe in." He looked back to my father. "You were my heir by name," he said evenly. Then to me, his voice warmed. "But Avery was my heir by choice." He leaned on his cane, voice steady. "She was born to carry what this family lost: integrity, compassion, strength without ego." His gaze held mine, unwavering. "You came into this world 6 months later, and when I held you, everything changed." He laughed, hoarse but full. "Doctors called it a miracle when my illness vanished. I called it a second chance." I could barely speak. "You never told me." "Because it wasn't time," he said. "Now it is." Around the table, no one moved. Even my stepmother had nothing smug left to cling to. My sister's smirk had vanished. My father looked like the foundation beneath him had cracked. "You planned this," he spat. "I prayed for her," Grandpa shot back. "And I watched you all treat her like a shadow. I stayed quiet, because I needed to know if she would bend." His hand tightened on the cane. "But she didn't." He looked at me one last time. "She stayed kind. She stayed strong, even when you gave her nothing but scraps." Grandpa said, voice trembling with fury, even when she sat at this table like a ghost. Then he turned to me, his voice softening. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner. I shook my head. Tears burned the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. You were always there, Grandpa, in your way. A different kind of silence fell, one heavy with guilt. My cousins lowered their eyes. My uncle opened his mouth, then closed it again, words lost in his throat. But Grandpa wasn't finished. Because that letter, that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He let out a long, steady breath and slowly lowered himself back into his chair. There's more, he said, just above a whisper. He nodded toward the old cabinet in the corner, the one nobody touched anymore, stuffed with yellowing albums and forgotten heirlooms. Bring me the black folder. For once, my youngest cousin didn't argue. He moved, quiet and quick, and returned with it in both hands like it was sacred. Grandpa opened it gently. Inside were neatly clipped papers, official documents, pages stamped and signed. He spread them across the table, one by one. This, he said clearly, is my will. The color drained from my father's face. No, he said hoarsely, we already saw your will last Christmas. Grandpa gave a slow, razor-sharp smile. No, he replied, you saw the version I wanted you to see. The real one was updated 6 months ago. Why? My aunt choked out. Why would you lie to us? He didn't even look at her. I made the changes the day Avery saved the company, he said. My heart clenched. You did that for me? Grandpa nodded, eyes steady. You're the sole heir now. The room erupted. My uncle leapt from his chair, fists clenched. This is outrageous. My stepmother gasped, one hand flying to her chest. She's not even qualified. My sister laughed bitterly. She makes coffee for a living. But Grandpa's hand slammed the table, the thunder of it stopping every voice cold. Enough. His eyes were flint. I gave you all every advantage, and you squandered them. You wore this family name like a crown, but you never earned it. He turned to my father, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked. You taught your daughter to feel small. I taught her to be strong, and now, she carries our name forward. I sat motionless, overwhelmed. Me. The forgotten one. The mistake. Now, the heir. My father's voice came low and furious. You made me executor of your will. No, Grandpa shot back. I made her executor of the real will. Something in my father faltered then. His shoulders sagged. Because deep down, he knew. He'd already lost. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I mattered. And still, Grandpa wasn't finished. There's one last thing, he said, his voice gentler now, laced with something unspoken. He reached beneath his chair and lifted a small wooden box. The same box I once saw him cry over, back when I was too young to understand why. It looked unremarkable, smooth wood, no lock, no markings. But I remembered. I remembered everything. I was 8 the first time I saw that box, tucked away in Grandpa's study like something sacred. I remembered the glimpse of photographs, the way he'd gently closed it with a whisper. One day, you'll understand. That day had come. He set the box before me, his hand steady despite the tremor in his fingers. Go on, Avery. I opened the lid, my fingers grazing the worn wood. Inside were bundles of letters tied with twine, faded photographs, and a small velvet pouch. I picked up the first letter. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My mother's. I glanced up. Across the table, my stepmother stared down at her plate, her face unreadable, stone still. The letter trembled in my hands. I don't know if I'm ready for this, it began. I'm scared. But she has your eyes, Papa, and your fire. My throat tightened. If I fail, please raise her right. Not to chase wealth. Not to chase perfection. But to be kind. Under the letter, there were photos, snapshots I'd never known existed. Me at 5, holding Grandpa's hand outside a bakery. Me at a school art fair, paint smudged across my cheeks. Me, asleep on his chest, a dusty novel open between us. He had kept everything. I never showed these to anyone, Grandpa said softly. They'd have laughed, mocked you more. His voice thickened. But I kept them because every time you smiled, despite them, I saw hope. I reached for the velvet pouch. Inside was a gold pendant. Simple, delicate. One word engraved. Legacy. I looked up. You gave this to Grandma, didn't you? He nodded. And now it's yours. Why me? I asked, barely able to speak. Because you listened. You learned. You never took the easy road. You never needed applause to do what was right. He smiled. And that's leadership. The silence in the room shifted, no longer cruel or smug. Now it was ashamed. But revenge had never been the point. I stood, holding the pendant tightly in my palm. Grandpa's will stand, I said. That's final. A ripple moved through the room, shock, protest, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to kick anyone out. I'm not stripping titles or homes. This isn't about revenge. My eyes met my father's. I just want you to understand, I didn't fail. You did. You failed to see me. And now, you carry that weight. I turned back to Grandpa. But I see you, I said softly. And I'll protect what you built. Not just the company, the heart of it. He smiled, pride etched into every line of his face. But then, his expression changed. Something deeper stirred behind his eyes. There's one more thing, he said, clearing his throat. Before I go. He reached beneath his chair and pulled out another envelope, weathered, sealed, older than the rest. This, he said, his voice low, isn't about money. It's about blood. My heart slammed against my ribs. The seal was faded, fragile. Grandpa held it like something alive. This was never meant to be opened, unless absolutely necessary. He looked at me. And tonight is that night. The room went still. My father's face turned ashen. My stepmother sat frozen, hands gripping the table edge. Grandpa opened the envelope and unfolded a single, brittle page. His voice, however, was steady. To my beloved father, if you're reading this, the secret I carried must now be known. I stopped breathing. The child I bore that cold December night was not James's. She belongs to another. Gasps broke the silence like glass. He was kind. Gentle. A man I met before the marriage was arranged. We had only weeks. But when I learned I was pregnant, I knew. And I chose silence, for the family's name. Grandpa looked up, his voice trembling as he stared at my father. Avery isn't your biological daughter. My father stood so fast his chair screeched across the floor. Lies, he spat. You expect me to believe this now? Grandpa's reply was calm, lethal. I had a DNA test done. Last month. I had to be sure before giving her everything. He slid the report across the table like a final judgment. My father glared at it, but didn't touch it. You hated her, Grandpa said, barely above a whisper. Because deep down, you already knew. Across the table, my stepmother's voice cracked. I loved him. But I stayed for the family. I stood. My legs shook, but my voice didn't. I never needed to be your daughter, I said to my father. I just wanted to belong. Even when you gave me nothing. He said nothing. Only collapsed into his chair, the last of his anger gone. I turned back to Grandpa. What do I do now? His eyes glistened, fierce with love. You lead, Avery. You heal. You build something better than what we were. And I did. In the months that followed, I rebuilt the company with compassion, not pride. I started scholarships in Grandma's name. Created programs for struggling employees. And slowly, they began to see me. My father never apologized. But one morning, he left a note on my desk. You've done more for this name than I ever did. Maybe that's what scares me most. I smiled. Because the truth had set us all free. I was never their mistake. I was the miracle they never deserved, but the one they desperately needed.